Common note number 10. Dress code in Divine Quran and Divine Quran. Very few verses deal with clothing of men and women. Relevant verses on this subject with comments are set out in these comments. 1. Verse number 26 of chapter 7 states, He, Rabbi Creator, told that clothing arrangement will be made for children of Adam and Eve so that the private parts are covered, the clothing being also for decoration and for guarding against bad effects. The above advice of Lillahi Creator should be followed as a direction. Comments. The above verse is indicating the broad objects of clothing for men as well as women. The purposes of clothing indicated in the above verse are I. Covering of their private parts by human beings. 2. Beautification of the human body. 3. Guarding against bad effects. These may include factors like heat, cold, protection against stings, bites, etc. of insects. However, circumstances, conditions, etc. may require a variation in clothing, but those should not be against morality or ethics. This may mean clothing depending upon the physical conditions in which one may be living. 2. Verse number 81 of chapter 16 states, Wallahu Creator has created garments for protection from heat and coats for protection against violence. Comments. The above verse further clarifies objects of clothing. These are set out below. I. Protection from heat. This has specific reference to the Middle East where the residents had to face high degree of heat due to the sun directly and the desert indirectly. 2. Covering made from different materials for protection against sharp weapons in battles. Such coverings have also been included as garments. 3. Verse number 30 of chapter 24 states, Believing men should always keep their eyes low and conceal their private parts. This will be correct for them. Innallahi Creator is aware of what anybody is doing. 4. Verse number 31 of chapter 24 states, The believing women should keep their eyes at a low level generally. The believing women have to conceal their private parts. They should not expose their bosoms. They should not expose their ornaments unnecessarily. Exceptions have been made in cases of husband, father, fathers of their husbands, sons, sons of their husbands, brothers, their brothers' sons, their sisters' sons, their women children and servants. Comments. The above verse deals with clothing of a believing woman. The following requirements are stated. I. Head and neck are covered in different ways depending on the physical condition of the area, generally the heat and the cold in the area. Divine Quran does not prescribe any covering only for these parts. 2. A cover for their bosoms. Obviously, this part will apply to grown-up females. It may be noted that in most parts of the world the front portion of the females is covered by one type of garment or another type. 3. Of course, everyone including females have to cover their private parts. It is to be noted that in most parts of this earth, this requirement is met by different clothing. 4. Not showing of ornaments refers to the length or shape of the clothing so that the ornaments put on by ladies are not easily visible. This could also be for the safety of the ornaments. The above verse clearly refers to females who are married and have therefore husbands, etc. 5. Verse number 59 of chapter 33 states, Rabbu Creator asks the Prophet to advise his wives, daughters and believing women, with them, to let their overgarments hang on them when they go out in public. As to who they are, thereby no one is likely to harass them. Comments The above dress code in verse number 59 of chapter 33 was suggested for the said ladies in those troubled conditions of the city of Mecca. This dress code was not for all times and of general application. Otherwise, reference to daughters and wives of Nabi was not required. 2. The object of the suggested dress code was to hide the identity of these women to save them from persons who were opposed to Prophet Muhammad or were illegally occupying Kaaba, his house. 6. Common comments on verse number 31 of chapter 24 and verse number 59 of chapter 33. A reading of the above two verses will show that a distinction is being made as to the dress to be worn by believing women generally and the dress to be worn by Nabi's wives, daughters and believing women, with them, while going out of doors. Absence of hanging garments on the body for believing women in verse number 31 of chapter 24 shows the normal dress for women, which means that they need not wear hanging garments on them, being not mandated by divine Quran. As already submitted in comments under verse number 59 of chapter 33, the reason for the particular dress for wives and daughters of Nabi was to hide their identity in those troubled times in and around Kaaba. Therefore, the normal dress for a believing woman is prescribed in verse number 31 of chapter 24 and not under verse number 59 of chapter 33. Verse number 59 of chapter 33 has been much misinterpreted without taking into account the effect of verse number 31 of chapter 24 and the circumstances in which hanging garments on particular females were suggested. 7. Therefore, no dress is prescribed mandatorily for females who are not women as given in verse number 59 of chapter 33. 8. Wearing of burqa, hanging garments, as used in verse number 59 of chapter 33, is not prescribed for women in general in divine Quran. 9. Further, other relevant verses on clothing are set out below. A. Verse numbers 1 and 2 of chapter 73 state, he, Nabi, is covered by clothes. One should get up at night and pray for some time. B. Verse numbers 1 and 2 of chapter 74 state, O Nabi wrapped up in cloth, he should be careful and convey his message. Common comments on above 4 verses. This requirement of being covered by clothing was specifically for Prophet Muhammad. This was related to the dress to be worn at the time of prayer by Nabi at night as shown by verse number 2 of chapter 73 above. As shown by the next verse number 2 of chapter 74, Nabi had to be fully clothed when he was to recite any part of divine Quran, warning to the person's public. 10. In view of the above verses relating to clothing of men, women and Nabi, it may be submitted that the objects of clothing have been stated in divine Quran. In particular situations like Nabi's dress while praying or dress of his wives and daughters while going out are set out. Otherwise, for female in general their clothing is indicated in verse number 31 of chapter 24. For men in general the indicated clothing is set out in verse number 26 of chapter 7 above. Subject to the above verses, a male or a female may wear any clothing. 11. Further comments. Hijab I. This word occurs in Divine Quran in the following verses and chapters. Verse number 46 of chapter 7, verse number 45 of chapter 17, verse number 17 of chapter 19, verse number 53 of chapter 33, verse number 5 of chapter 41, and verse number 51 of chapter 42. 2. Its use and meaning in Divine Quran is only as a curtain. Its use is in no way connected to any part of the human body. 3. For clothing garments, the words used in Divine Quran are libas in verse number 187 of chapter 2, verse number 26 of chapter 7, verse number 112 of chapter 16, libasan, verse number 26 of chapter 7, verse number 47 of chapter 25, verse number 10 of chapter 78, libashum, verse number 23 of chapter 22, verse number 33 of chapter 35, libasuhuma, verse number 27 of chapter 7, kiswatum, verse number 89 of chapter 5, kiswatuhunna, verse number 233 of chapter 2. Julabihinna, verse number 81 of chapter 16, verse number 59 of chapter 33, Kumurihinna, verse number 31 of chapter 24. 4. The only provision which is mandatory is covering of private parts of the human body. It is quite clear from the above verses that prescribing any code of dress by anyone will be inconsistent with the Quranic verses. 12. Verse number 116 of chapter 3 states, "For the disobedient in Minallahi Creator and not following the guidelines principles given in book, they are to be in hell to face the fire." 13. Why this indifference of Mohammedans to correctly reading and understanding the Divine Quran, particularly when many verses thereof lay down penalties? For example only, verse number 174 of chapter 2 states, "Those who hide or misinterpret any part of the revelation made in writing, book, will be swallowing the fire on the day of judgment."